Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. My name is Max Odkins with the Fire and Resource Assessment Program here at CAL FIRE, and I'm excited to welcome you to this presentation from one of our grantees in our Forest Health Research Program. We're joined today by Dr. Michael Goulden from the University of California, Irvine for this presentation, Mapping and Tracking California Forests over the Last 40 Years. Today's presentation is part of CAL FIRE's Forest Health Research Grant Program, which is funded in part by California Climate Investments, which puts cap and trade dollars to work in communities throughout California. This program seeks to prioritize and fund research in forest health and fire science critical to the state of California and share the scientific information and support statewide plans, including the California Wildfire and Forest Resilience Action Plan. We have competitive grant solicitations, typically annually, and as of now, we have funded over 100 competitive grants for about $34 million total. And you can find more information about our grant program at the website that's linked on the slide, as well as the QR code that's on the slide. Before we get started, I do have a little bit of housekeeping. So if you haven't attended one of these webinars before, please note that the recording will be posted on our webpage, which you can see using that QR code there. It usually will be posted about a week after the webinar occurs. And we will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So you can participate in that by typing your questions into the chat at any time during the presentation, or you can use the raise hand feature and we'll enable you to ask your questions at the end of the presentation as well. So with that, I would love to introduce our speaker today. Dr. Mike Goulden is a professor of Earth System Science at UC Irvine. Goulden's research focuses on ecosystem ecology and the biological, physical, and chemical controls on terrestrial carbon and water cycling. Goulden has conducted extensive fieldwork on carbon change in tropical, boreal, and temperate ecosystems. His more recent work emphasizes satellite-based mapping of ecosystem conditions and function. So with that, thank you very much for being here and presenting your research to us today. Please take it away.
Okay, thanks a lot, Max. Awesome, happy to be here. Give me a minute to start to share screen and we'll launch into things. Okay, I need to minimize that. Share. And can you see it?
Yes, that's coming through.
Okay.
Great.
All right. Awesome. Let's get started. So title is Mapping and Tracking California Forest over the last 40 years. And my goal today is to introduce, explain, and invite you to use a very large geospatial data set, which gets called the CECS, or Center for Ecosystem Climate Solutions geospatial database. So I actually have a bit of an agenda. I want to give you something for free. And what I want to give you is this data set. And the outline today, I'm going to introduce the CECS geospatial data set, or data cube. I'm going to talk about the methods and the approach, give you an introduction to how this data set was actually created. I'm going to talk about testing and validating the data set. That's actually principally what we're doing with the forest health funding. Is we're trying to improve the testing and validation of the data set. I'm going to spend a fair bit of time talking about some results and implications of the data set. I'm briefly going to touch on the long-term vision for the data set, and then I'll just summarize with the take-home messages. So let's just launch into what this geospatial data set is. Let me see how I advance right there. I'm I'm gonna give you the sort of the specs or the specifications of the data set. And what it is it's a four-dimensional data cube. And those four dimensions, first off, there are two spatial dimensions. So latitude and longitude, you could think of it as. And those are at 30 meters, but they're actually 30 meters all the way up now to CONUS, so the lower 48. So that's your first two dimensions, and then there's 40 years. So this is a time series geospatial data set with a separate data layer for each year from 1985 to, at this point, 2024. And then there are at least 20 core metrics. So 20 metrics that you or your colleagues might be interested in. So that's the extent of the data set. It's true 30-meter mapping, and it's true annual mapping. So it isn't like you map a year and then you identify those places that changed and you only remap those places that changed. It's not there. That it's actually an independent or largely independent map of each year. When you multiply those four dimensions together, you start to get to a pretty large um, data set. So just spatially, it's about 500,000,000 pixels for the California-wide data set. It's about 3 billion for the West-wide. And the CONUS now is about 10 billion pixels. So it's a very large database. It's processed not with a turnkey program, but it's a whole series of component programs that each feed into each other. Those are written in MATLAB. Are if you want to use these data, you don't need to know anything about those programs. We've already run those programs for you. You don't need to know anything about the big underlying database. You just want the data, but this is what's underneath it. It is structured in a way to be very rapidly updatable. So we'd actually produce the 2024 first draft. So through last September, so the end of last water year, we actually had that produced and posted by January 2025. So it's structured in a way to very rapidly be updated. It's structured in a way to scale very rapidly. So when I started mapping, I started with the Kings River Basin in 2012, then that scaled Sierra-wide in 2016, California-wide in 21, West-wide in 24, and now it's CONUS in 25. And you can guess that the long-term goal is to create a global data cube. It's based on a lot of field testing, data, intercomparisons, feedback, iterative development. This actually did not emerge out of nowhere. It emerged out of literally hundreds of conversations actually with many of the people on this call, and we actually listened. We would sort of say, what's the ideal data set going to look like? And then we set out to build that ideal data set. It's based on lots of previous successes, failures, experience, and it's got a nice backbone of sort of fundamental ecosystem ecology and sort of biogeophysical ecology. So it's kind of a hybrid. It's not just a mapping exercise. It really builds in that understanding of the biophysics and the ecology. And on the right is starting to give you a hint of what the data layer looks like. There's California, that's 30 meters. And that layer that happens to be displayed there is live above ground carbon. But all of those other data layers are some of the other properties that are mapped. Okay, this is now a animation, and that's CONUS. So that's the current extent of the sort of the grand database. There's actually three spatial extents. There's California-wide, West-wide, and CONUS, and they're actually all essentially at this point the same basic database, but the CONUS is so big that it's kind of unwieldy, and so a lot of people like the California wide, and that's where it all this all started. This happens to be for 2023. It happens to be a property called gross primary production, or GPP, which is basically the annual photosynthesis. So it's the inputs to the system. Now I'm going to let the animation roll. And so you could see that's what it looked like at CONUS wide. Now we're actually zooming in on UCI's campus. So we're down here now in Orange County. You can see it maintains that fidelity as you scroll across space. And so I zoomed into UCI's campus. I'm actually sitting kind of right around where the hand is, if you can see it there. This is UCI's campus, that dark blue area, which is the most productive part of UCI's campus. That's our sort of central round park right there. And then this is the boundary of UCI's property. And then you can see these sort of lines coming out, the spokes coming out of the center of UCI's campus. Those are forested, treed, street trees coming out. The blue things tend to be parks. That's gross primary production, and this now shows what UCI's campus looks like, and the white arrow is essentially the angle that the camera on the right-hand side took the picture. And so you can see it's sort of looking across a shrubland. That's kind of our fire hazard on campus, is that coastal sage shrubland, and then it's looking into those areas that are trees. And so you can see within this geospatial data set, you can see that 30-meter resolution. It holds up when you zoom the whole way in, and you can basically see the same features on that handheld camera on the right-hand side that you can actually see zoomed in all the way from CONUS all the way down to local sort of backyard scale. That's gross primary production. Let's see, this one is above ground biomass. A lot the same. You can see above ground biomass. There's that central park there where the trees are. Here's another treed park in the upper right-hand side. You can see these walkways, street trees, and then you can actually see the trees planted along the various uh, uh, roads in the area. And then you can see no biomass in the parking lots, in the buildings. So it again, it rolls across a wide range of scale. This is kind of an interesting figure. It's the same basic idea. This is vegetation type. Vegetation type is getting mapped as the fraction of shrubs, the fraction of trees, and the fraction of herbaceous. And then each of those fractions turns into a color. So areas that are green have a high percentage of trees. Areas that are red have a high percentage of grasslands. So you can see all of these grasslands, like that's an athletic field over there. In the middle, you can see the trees associated with that central park, and some grasses there. Then this sort of blue area near the arrow, that's that shrub corridor. So that maps up in blue as shrubs, and then the dark areas are unvegetated. And so those are like parking lots and the roofs of buildings. So that's veg type. That's just one of the many data layers that's getting mapped. Oh, This one's relevant to the water balance. This is actual evapotranspiration. And again, you can see the same basic patterns. That Central Park there is evaporating a lot of water. The street trees, they evaporate water, and then these areas, the buildings, essentially no negligible evapotranspiration. So that's three or four or five, I'm not sure, of the data layers. It gives you a sense of some of the data layers that are in this data set, and it shows you how things roll across space, how you can you could zoom in from CONUS, zoom in to a backyard, you could zoom back out, you could go to some place in Georgia, where any place, and it maintains that fidelity across all of those spatial scales. The one I haven't really talked that much about is the temporal scale. This now is conditional flame length. So this is essentially fire hazard. And right now it's 2010, and you can see those areas that I think we all know are susceptible to wildfire, interior North Coast, Sierra Backbone, Southern California mountains. They're all showing up as of 2010 as high fire hazard. And now I'm gonna start this. This is another animation, but this time, initially, we're just gonna zoom in to Southern California because I want to focus in here on the San Jacinto Mountains. And now what the animation is going to do is it's going to roll forward. And what you're seeing is three fire polygons. So the mountain fire 2012 already burned, and you can see the fuels were all stripped away. So we had a large reduction in flame length. And now that next fire, the Cranston, the Cranston pops, and you can see the polygon, and you can see the reduction in flame length associated with that. Now we're up to 2020. The mountain fire is actually starting to recover, and now the Fairview fire, a little bit of a lower elevation fire, that goes in 2022. Meanwhile, the mountain fire has started to the vegetation's come back in, fuel loads are starting to come back up, and you're starting to look at an area that conceivably could burn again. So that's your temporal domain. I just showed you this, I think, what was it, like 2012 to 2024, but the temporal domain actually goes all the way from 85 to 2024. So you can see how things change over time. So that sort of scopes out the main dimensions of the data cube, the X and Y spatially, the different properties, and the time series. What would the data set, what would the access to the data set, if you want to use this data, what would it look like? Well, you would just go to the Google Drive. Some of it's already opened. Some of it I would need to add you to access, and I'm happy to do that. Just let me know what you want, and I'll add you to the access. You would come into Google Drive into this left-hand list of directories. There's your always favorite README. There's documentation. You could take a look at the documentation of the data set. And then depending on what you wanted to see, probably for this group, you would just kick into this California-wide. West-wide and CONUS, those are much, much larger spatially data sets, and they're not really built out yet. So you would probably start at the California-wide. You'd go into that directory, and then you'd see a whole bunch of directories organized by these different properties. There's biodiversity, dead above ground carbon. Here's the FCCS layer. That's a fuels related layer that you could run in something like FOFM. The flame maps are output from flame map LCP. You could feed that into something like flame map, bunch of veg types, disturbances, shrub disturbance, tree disturbance, tree fraction, here's erosion, a bunch of water-related data layers, and then you would go into one of these, say you want to get some live above ground carbon, you'd go into there and you'd see a whole series of files, and you'd take whatever you want. Each one is for a year, so that's 2024, 23, 22, and all of these are the California wide data sets. Okay, how's it work? You don't have to, this will not be on the final exam, so you don't have to like study this, but I do get questions. How does this whole thing work? Basically what it is it's a bunch of existing approaches and models that have all been bolted together. So it um, starts at the top. Some of the main input is Landsat. It's really built on a Landsat backbone. So it uses the entire Landsat time series. So now we have the entire Landsat time series for all of CONUS is on our kind of local computing cluster. And then a bunch of plot data, flux tower data, other things. They feed in at the top, and then things run through a series of programs, and then at the bottom is what you would want. Those are the important critical properties. And it's all sort of, I wouldn't say it's automated. It isn't like you can push a single button and the whole thing runs. But each of these squares are now automated. All of the arrows are now automated and coded up. And so when the Landsat data gets updated, you just download the new Landsat data and you just run it through all of these steps, and it produces things at the bottom. And in fact, you do the entire thing gets run. So all 40 years gets run. So when things get updated, I don't just run it for that year. I actually run it for all 40 years because there probably have been a bunch of updates to the code. So that's what the whole thing looks like. But let's not get caught up in the details of that. Let's talk a little bit about the architecture of this processing, because that's really why we were able to do what we did. So over on the left, there are four steps, and three of them are super obvious, and they're basically what everyone does. They're data inputs, things like remote sensing data, plots, flux towers, etc. And then number three are data outputs. That's the data that you potentially want to use. And then data, or point number four, secondary models. That's something like flame map or CWHR or Russell or spatial FOFM. There's other things. And so we're producing things like LCP files that can be used in flame map. But the really important thing here is step number two. And what step number two is that's what we call our biogeophysical or our ecosystem function backbone. And what that is kind of a core piece of the system that builds in some of the really basic principles in ecology. So it like builds in the principle of mass balance. Okay, mass balance that's like your bank account. That's just saying that the amount of stuff that you have next year is going to be determined by the amount of stuff that you had this year, plus any deposits that you put into your bank account minus any withdrawals. Okay, that's like a very basic like mass balance equation, and that's where we are able to build that in. There's another really basic thing in there, which is the equivalency of carbon pools and fuel. Okay, one person's carbon pool, like dead stuff, dead leaves, is another person's fuel. And so we're able to build that into the biogeophysical backbone, and we're able to make sure that the detrital carbon stocks are quantitatively equal to the fuels. Okay? And then there's other stuff in there, like the shape, the fundamental shape of plants. If you want to build a 200-foot tall tree, you cannot build it all with quarter-inch diameter stems. It's not gonna stand up. You have to have some big diameter. You have to have some medium diameter. You have to have some fine diameter. Okay? So because we have this biogeophysical backbone, the architecture looks like over on the right-hand side. You have these inputs, they feed into this sort of biogeophysical core, and then they come out on the right-hand side, and it just scales way more efficiently, and it is able to take advantage of all of that information that we have from the basic science, the basic ecology. And that's really why we were able to create something that would very rapidly be able to bring together all of this information and produce a wide range of different properties or data sets. Okay, so what I want to talk about now is testing and kind of quote validating the data. This is the type of thing that we're doing as part of this forest health project. And the best testing, I think, I kind of think most of us would agree, is going to be done with plot data. And what you want is, honestly, you want big sample sizes, and you want them to be co-located. You want to be able to have data where you can align your geospatial numbers with what was actually in situ measured. This is an example using a data set that was collected at UC Berkeley. I think it was Scott Stevens' lab originally has started collecting this, has been collecting it. I got these data, or actually Kristen. I actually gave the SEEKS data to Kristen at Berkeley, and she did this comparison. A couple really nice things about this data set is it was collected several times. So they went to the same location. So you can look and see the changes in above ground biomass. And then they've got a decent collection of plots. I don't know. I think they've got something like 100. And what that allows you to do is do a couple of comparisons. You can do a spatial comparison. So the bottom right-hand plot is a spatial comparison. On the x-axis is Kristen's plot data for 2021, and on the y-axis is what SEEKS thinks the numbers are. So that's a spatial comparison, and you can also do a temporal, like a change, an accumulation of carbon. So again, that's what Kristen saw as the change or loss of biomass, and what SEEKS thought was the accumulation or loss of biomass. So honestly, I think this agreement here is pretty good. The upper panel, the temporal, I actually think is quite good. And so what it's saying is that SEEKS is doing a good job of quote measuring the changes in above ground biomass over time. The bottom panel, I'd say that looks okay. It shows saturation. And so you reach a certain point, Kristen knows that those plots are telling her that the forests are getting progressively bigger and bigger and bigger. SEEKS is unable to see. SEEKS is sort of saturated. SEEKS hits this point, 150, 200 tons. Just it struggles to distinguish between those really high biomass plots. Almost every geospatial data set of biomass struggles with that saturation. I would say from this that, SEEKS is as good as anything. It might be the best for the temporal changes. It's okay for the spatial. It's got its warts, but everything struggles with that saturation issue. Another testing. A lot of this has actually been done by Roger Bales at Merced, and I think Roger now is moving over to full-time, actually retired full-time at Berkeley. But you can get at water. You can test water. And the way you do that is SEEKS tells you what the evapotranspiration is. Precipitation minus evapotranspiration, what's left is runoff. Then you can compare that with the amount of water that shows up in reservoirs. And the comparison here to look at are the two triangles. So you can see over time, this happens to be the Kings River basin draining into Pine Flat Reservoir. And if you look at the triangles, you see pretty good agreement. And that tells us that our ETE is not crazy either in terms of absolute numbers or tracking interannual variability. So that's an example of some of the testing that we've done. An even easier way to test the SEEKS data set, though, honestly, is just to compare it with the other geospatial data sets out there. So this is super useful, super quick series of tests. Pretty much anything I can get a hold of, I will test because I want to have a good solid data set. I don't want to throw something out there that's not credible. This one is runoff. So this is SEEKS runoff. This is precipitation minus evapotranspiration. This is where California's water comes from. A lot of that stuff on the North Coast is going out to the Pacific. Just about all that coming off of the Sierra, the west slope of the Sierra, is at least initially passing through reservoirs. So that's where the water comes from. And then this is the Forest Service's forest to faucets data set. And you can see, we're getting the same basic pattern. We pretty much agree on that. SEEKS is a 30-meter resolution. Forest to faucets is some relatively fine level HUC. So it doesn't look exactly the same, but agreement, I think is pretty solid. This one is the SEEKS above ground biomass. You can see the biomass is highest on that north coast. Beautiful redwood forest up principally along the coast all the way down to Bay Area, San Mateo County. So that's SEEKS above ground biomass. And this now is JEDI above ground biomass. JEDI is a NASA mission, spaceborne LiDAR. And you can see patterns are pretty much the same. You see a lot of gaps in JEDI. Those are the satellite tracks, or I think that's on the space station. So that's biomass. This is PM 2.5 potential emissions. This is were an area to burn. How much smoke would be produced. This is calculated from mapping fuels into a type of data known as FCCS, which then gets run in spatial FOFM. You can see if those forests along the North Coast burn, they're potentially going to give off an awful lot of smoke. And then this data layer is a federal data layer. I think it's a Forest Service data layer. I think it's actually in IFTDIS, and get the same basic idea. They have similar similar patterns. They're not exactly the same. Seeks thinks there might be more coming off the North Coast, but to first order, they're it's the same basic idea. I don't think you could say which is right and which isn't right. We would need independent data for that, but you can say that they're both in that sort of credible collection of data sets. And then this is vertebrate richness. So this is areas that are green, potentially have a greater diversity of vertebrate habitat. Areas that are red don't. And then I think the authoritative data set on this for California is probably Fish and Wildlife's ACE data set. And again, same basic idea. So SEEKS is in the, it's in that sort of credible collection of data sets. And then to look at things like fire hazard, and die-off risk, for better or worse, we actually do have a pretty good metric of fire and die-off, which is what are the areas that actually burned and what are the areas that actually died off. And we have that time series, so we can roll back to 2010. We can say, wow, what was the fire hazard in 2010? What was the die-off risk in 2010? And did those areas actually burn? Did they actually die off? So on the left, this is conditional flame length in 2010. On the right, this is die-off hazard in 2010. And now these are the areas that actually burned and the areas that actually died off in that 2014 to 2017 Southern Sierra sort of killing drought. And pretty solid. Yeah. So, honestly, I think that's probably about as good as someone can do. And it's only possible because we have that time series, because we can roll back in time. Okay, I want to now hop over to implications, results, and I want to talk about how California's landscape has changed over the last 10, 20 years. So we all know about the fires. This happens to be MTBS data set. You can see all the areas that burned over the last, say, 10 years. And pick your fire. There certainly have been a lot of them. So that's what the actual burn looks like. And then what we can do is, because we have this time series, we can start to subtract years. And we can see how things change. This one is tree cover. Areas that are brown lost tree cover from 2012 to 2022. This is simply the subtraction of the data layer in 2022 minus 2012. Okay, and so there's your fires. There's your loss of tree cover. And obviously we have a lot of properties. We can look at some of those other properties. So that's tree cover. This one is flame length. Okay, conditional flame length areas that are green actually have a reduced fire hazard. So, for better or worse, there's actually some, I don't know, constructive news from these fires, and the fire hazard in those areas that burned is significantly reduced, associated with the fire stripping away the fuels. There are areas that are regrowing. You look at Southern California, like there's station fire down here. So areas that are red actually have an increase in fire hazard, but on the whole, there's more green than there is red. Flame length, This one's runoff. We're very, very likely getting more runoff now because of those fires. So they strip away the canopy, reduce leaves, um, cut down on AET, actual evapotranspiration, actually increase runoff. So that's your runoff pattern over the last 10 years. Let's see, above ground biomass, we've lost above ground biomass. I'm pretty darn sure of that. So that's where above ground live biomass has been lost. Much of that actually just shifted to the dead pool. But in terms of live, we've lost a lot of above ground biomass, especially in 2020, 2021. Potential smoke emissions very likely has reduced in those areas of burn with the reduction in fuels. Um, uh, this one's actually kind of interesting. Some areas have increased in habitat quality. Some areas decreased. Like here in Santa Cruz Mountains, that big fire in that dense forest, you actually saw an increase. You opened it up and you saw an increase over near San Jose. But those Sierra fires, Creek Fire there, Dixie Fire there, had a large detrimental effect on species vertebrate habitat richness. Okay, what's it look like when you sum it up over the whole state? Because that's what you can do. You can take all those 30-meter pixels, aggregate them up, and you see big changes in the last couple of years. But you also start to see some recovery. So increase in runoff, vertebrate habitat, kind of complex because you had offsetting effects. Your fire hazard was reduced. Your die-off risk was forest die-off risk was reduced. Sadly, some of that was because there were simply less live trees that could die. But you see those big patterns at a statewide wildland scale. Um, what was causing it? This now breaks those large scale averages out by areas that on the upper left hand, those were areas that did burn, did not die off. And then the upper right hand is areas that burned and died off. And the bottom is areas that neither burned nor died, and then the bottom left is just those areas that died off, and principally it's fire, but it's there's also a pretty strong indication of an interacting effect. So the biggest changes are going to be those areas that died off, and then they subsequently burned. And then those areas that neither burned nor died off, there weren't large changes there. So that all makes sense. That I think is pretty much what we would expect. The state and the feds are putting a lot of treatments on the land. Are we able to start to see the effects of those treatments? This now summarizes across the state's wildlands, and it looks in the crosshatched bars at the areas that have had large reductions in flame length in the crosshatched. Those are the reductions associated with fire. And then in the solid bars, those are the areas that were actually treated. And so the effects thus far of treatment are pretty small relative to the effects of wildfire. And that, to some extent, that makes a lot of sense because we're burning a lot more areas burn than was treated. But the other big issue here is that a lot of that area that was reported as treated either perhaps was not actually treated or was treated relatively lightly. So we're just not seeing that much of an effect of treatment on these ecosystem services thus far. Let's now talk a little bit about these treatments. So the task force has a really, really nice, they had effort going underway to compile and bring together the maps of treatments. And this is this interagency treatment tracker, nice data set. And when you go into a data set like that, you're going to see something like this. Each of these is a permitted series of treatments for different years. Color is a different year. So those are the areas that could be treated. How much of that area actually was treated? This now is a map of areas that actually were treated, measured by satellite. And so you can see there's a lot of area in here that's in the ITS treatment tracker database that didn't actually get treated. But then on the other hand, there's areas that, like over on the right-hand side, the sort of tilde-shaped area that actually were treated that were not in the ITS database. So that's the treatment and story. And then another powerful thing that you can do with this database is you can just do large scale. Like if you had to do large scale reporting on something like biomass, um, uh, uh, like the state's biomass, how has that changed over time? And ultimately, this type of work would need to be done for like the framework, bunch of different uses. And so what this right-hand figure shows is, first off, this straight line going up. That's the EPA reporting for California's biomass. And then the blue line that goes down, that's the SEEKS line. So that's what we think biomass was over the last 10, 20 years. Incredibly different, totally different. And then you've got a couple of data sets. You've got C-trees, Alan Jou's data set that essentially split the difference. What I would say from this is we need to do more of these inner comparisons because I honestly think it's a little crazy how different these data sets are. Okay. Oh, how are things going to recover? You can do chronosequence analyses. So because we have this time series, we can go and we can look at old data sets or we can look at old records. In this case, we're looking at areas that burned in 1992 to 1994. So the data points on the extreme left of this were recorded in the late 80s, and then it's just going to roll forward for 35, 40 years. And you can actually see how those early record fires subsequently recovered. And that's succession. That's basically how it works, and it all pretty much makes sense. So that's yet another thing that you can get out of this data set. And then sort of a similar time series, chronosequence time series, which I think is kind of cool. A grad student here at UCI just pulled this up a couple weeks ago. What he's got here is on the bottom is flame length. So that is the recovery of potential fire severity from a burn. And that makes sense. It's going to take like 20, 30 years to get enough fuels and fuel structure back on in that area for it to burn like it burned before. But the upper panel is burn probability. So this is the likelihood that that area could carry a fire through. And the scary thing about this is it pops back really fast. So much faster. It comes back within five years, and there it'll like carry a fire through it. So this sort of tells us that burning is probably not going to prevent subsequent burning across the landscape. It may prevent subsequent severe fire or fire severity because there isn't enough stuff to burn big, but the fire is going to be able to carry through those areas relatively quickly. Okay, I'm going to skip this one because I'm just about out of time. And I want to give you punchlines. I want you to use these data. If if you're a geospatial person, please use these data. I mean, put a lot of effort into building them. I'm giving them away. Come on. Maybe they're not for you, but you've got a colleague. Forward this on. Max was saying they're going to record this. So forward on the link. Really want to see these data get used. Whatever you see, if you see warts in the data, please let me know. If you know of data sets that we could use to compare, please let me know. Relatively comprehensive data set, crosses silos, disciplines, trying to make something that's a one-stop shopping for a range of issues, rapidly updated data, already updated through fall of 2024. If you wanted to, you could start answering questions today. California-wide is the best data set. That's the best vetted, the best intercompared. West-wide's getting better. CONUS is rolling off the presses. Want to do future updates every 6 months with something like a 2-month latency. And so the 2025 water year will have those data hopefully ready by next January, built by UC experts. Hopefully we use the best available science. That's what we do. And the data are free for non-commercial use, minimal strings attached. And it's the only restriction is it's non-commercial. You can't take the data and sell them. But beyond that, it's there for you to use. So there's a link I think in the announcement of the seminar. And then you can get in touch with me too, or you could probably get in touch with Max if you need my contact information. And that's it. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Goulden. I really appreciate you coming and presenting this. It's certainly a very extensive data set, and I'm hoping that many of the people here can find good ways to put it to use. So with that, we will transition over to question and answer. Again, thank you very much for the presentation.